This week is all about setting a new plan, setting new intentions, and getting the energy ready to have an explosive start to the new year. How's it going, everybody? My name is Cam White, and welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for January 8th through January 14th, 2024. This week, we see a progression as more planets go into Capricorn, and we see a big boost of energy. However, we do have a few more things to wrap up with the Mercury retrograde. But one of the highlights we have this week is the new moon in Capricorn. So this is a really, really good week to say, all right, what is the plan that we're going to start working with? What are the intentions that we're setting? Because Mercury retrograded through Capricorn. We had the whole review, reflection, changing things. The new moon in Capricorn is time to really set the intentions of that. So let's go ahead and get started with it. If you guys hear background noise like drumming, there's actually the annual Denver livestock parade that's going on in front of my house, which I find really funny for Capricorn season. Once I'm done recording, I want to make sure, I just want to see if there's any goats because, Capricorn season. But anyway, we start the week off with the moon in Sagittarius, making a conjunction to Venus. As well, one of our highlights for Monday is Mercury making a square to Neptune. Now, I really I feel like this goes without saying, the moon in Sag conjoining Venus in Sag just sounds fun. It sounds adventurous. It sounds exciting. It sounds like a very passionate, philosophical way to start the week off. While the moon's in Sagittarius, and maybe we want to be more explorative, more adventurous, more running away. I had this whole literally yesterday, I had to confront a tweaker that was harassing a woman on the street. And then it was there was a tweaker woman yelling outside. And then a tweaker got in a fight with a security guard when I was smoking a cigarette in the alley. And I got to this point where I was like, I need to get out of this country. And I was looking at Airbnbs in Costa Rica, and what it's like being a Sagittarius rising or a Sag sun or just having Sag placements is running, the grass is always greener on the other side. That's the whole MO for Sagittarius. And I feel like with the moon in Sag conjoining Venus is wanting to run away, wanting to, again, there's so much enjoyment and pleasure in escaping and going off into an adventurous new area. It's also it's like a bestial sign. I always think of Sagittarius as very primal, but the moon conjoining Venus just sounds like an excellent day to have fun, express yourself. If you are in any sort of artistic, if you do anything artistic or creative, I think Monday's a really excellent day for that. But what I think is really interesting is with the highlight for the week is Mercury makes a square to Neptune. And the whole thing with Mercury making a square to Neptune is while Mercury wants to plan and have logistics, it's in detriment in Sagittarius. It's too caught up on the bigger picture and it's hard to bring it back down to reality. And Mercury making a square to Neptune is kind of is the big picture possible? Is where I want to go possible to get to? And, kind of my advice for Monday is lean more into the having fun part of it. It doesn't always have to be serious. I heard a good saying, I think this was from Wes Watson, but stop borrowing grief from the future for today. Meaning don't worry about, how the outcome's going to be in the future and today. If it doesn't work in the future, well, you can cross that bridge when you get there. But today is the day to actually enjoy the process and be excited about at least trying to go where you want to go. I really love that saying of not borrowing grief from the future to use it today. And I feel like that's a good way of looking at Monday because with the moon conjoining Venus, it has a lot of fun energy and Mercury's in Sag still too. So it's our head is a little bit still up in the clouds and it's squaring Neptune. And there's a lot of uncertainty, especially in the way that we communicate and the way that we, again, maybe you get some sort of a message, some sort of a, document, some sort of communication happens between you and someone else. It's really confusing. There's not a lot of clarity around it. And I think the vibe for Monday is just have fun with it. Don't think about it too hard. And again, think about the bigger picture. It's rather than thinking of what if things go wrong, think about what if things go right. Then we step into Tuesday. On Tuesday, the moon, while it's in Sagittarius, will first square Neptune, then it will conjoin Mercury and then enter Capricorn. The two highlights that we have on Tuesday is Mars will sextile Saturn and the sun will trine Uranus. Really liking Tuesday. I think this week and next week have a lot of really awesome things going on. But as the moon is in Sagittarius squaring Neptune, again, this is kind of not seeing the forest through the trees. This is being a little bit too okay, I'm out going this way, but what does that mean? Where exactly am I? And, there's a part of that where you could at least kind of should know where exactly you're at in terms of a hiking analogy. But, another part of it is don't get too confused on what exactly it is, like where exactly it is that you're trying to go. Like, and in terms of like visualization, I learned this a long time ago, and in my opinion, it's the best tool. But like when you're visualizing a future, let's say it's a relationship, a job, a living situation, whatever it is, you don't want to, like, yes, you want to visualize the exact things, but you want to encompass the feeling. Like, okay, because if you're visualizing, if you're quote unquote manifesting, I say that loosely, you don't want to be like, I want to manifest X, Y, and Z things and think of it in like a very right brain logical way. You want to embody the feeling and the emotion of what it feels like to achieve the things that you want. And I think with that moon making that square to Neptune is like, hey, like you might be able to say out loud, these are the things I want. This is the direction I'm going to go. But are you embodying that feeling? Because it's easier to, again, I like, you know, when it comes to like this astrology shit and spiritual shit, like so much of shit is intuitive. Like what's cool about astrology is it's an excellent practice to understand what your intuition looks like and trusting that. And I think with the moon squaring Neptune, it can get really hard to like get an exact picture of what it is that you want. Like if you're someone like me, like I'm a very visual person, but I can sometimes struggle with like the exact image of how I want things to look in my life. But it's easier for me to lean into like, what does it feel like? And when I have that feeling and I get in that high frequency state, it makes it so much easier to walk down that path. So as the moon makes that square to Neptune, there's a little bit of a confusion on what the vision is, where your emotions are really going. And again, I would just rely on the feeling of the excitement, if that makes sense. The moon will make a conjunction to Mercury. I think this is, again, like with Mercury and Sag, you don't know what you don't know, and you might as well go with what you have and not worry and stress about what you don't know and what you don't have. Does that make sense? The moon will ingress into Capricorn later on Tuesday, and this begins the new moon in Capricorn. Technically, you know, it's not there yet. That happens on Thursday, but on Tuesdays, the moon goes into Capricorn. It's like time to lock it in, time to get serious. The moon in Capricorn, in my opinion, is kind of like detaching from the emotion, not having like an emotional connection to the outcome. And there's a part of that that's important for like the manifestation part of it and like the visualization part of it. But there's another part of it that's like moon in Capricorn is like, just do the work. And you have to kind of, this is something I heard Rick Rubin say the other day, is like, you've got to enjoy, like, if you're so focused on the outcome, like that's not the point of making music or making art. You have to just focus on the work. You have an inner need to express something and detach yourself from the outcome of it and just do what is calling you to do that. And that's how I think, that's how I look at this moon in Capricorn transit. But the two highlights that we have on Tuesday is Mars will make a sextile to Saturn. Mars is in Capricorn. There is such a streamlined efficiency to Mars in Capricorn. There is this, sure, you know, Mars does bring fights, conflicts, and, you know, problems wherever it goes, but it's exalted. So it's kind of like, while you might have a problem, a solution is immediately met. While there might be frustration in your work, like you're working too much, you're accomplishing a lot at the same time. Like I feel like with Mars in Capricorn, effort is rewarded equally to like your again, like your effort or your output is just rewarded equally to the amount that you put in. So Mars making that sextile to Saturn, while Saturn's still in Pisces, if Saturn is about, again, responsibility, yes, it is restrictions and limitations and you could just like contraction. With Saturn in Pisces, it's a mutable water sign. These things that we have to be responsible over or that we have to take care of are going to change and adapt with our like environment. I think that's just the easiest way to look at it. And Saturn in Pisces is, again, like, we need to be the people that we like want to be on the inside. It's like hardening that part of ourselves on the inside. And I look at Mars in Capricorn while it's in Saturn sign, sextiling Saturn in Pisces is like, hey, this is a part of the work that you are signing up for. This is a part of this process, and it's easier to lean into. Like when I look at like Virgo and Pisces stuff with Saturn there, it's like the Virgo part of us wants to like have all of the answers and have all of the clarity in the plan or the again, we just want everything to have like a checklist. But with Saturn and Pisces, it's like, well, you don't get that. Like you don't get to know exactly what it is that you need. You just need to do what it is that you like feel like, not necessarily feel like doing, but like what you feel inside that you know that you need to do. And I think with Mars in Capricorn sextiling Saturn and Pisces, like you can accomplish a lot without having an expectation of the outcome. And again, the work works on you more than you work on it. And you can apply that anywhere in your life, because how you do one thing is how you do another. I can't stress that enough. I think it's a Hormozy quote. The work works on you more than you work on it. And what I love about that is, like, with Mars in Capricorn, sextiling Saturn in Pisces, this is about like, hey, let's just do the work, not necessarily because you want to make all this money or you want this success or you want whatever, because you want the outcome. You're doing the work because the work is going to create the person that you want to be, that is going to create the person that achieves those outcomes. On Tuesday as well, the other highlight is the sun makes a trine to Uranus. I love this for any sort of a breakthrough, for any sort of innovation, for any sort of a sense of freedom or rebellion. And as the sun makes that trine to Uranus, if the sun is our willpower and our identity and just vitality, it's in Capricorn where we're more connected to structures and systems and planning and just being serious about things. And it's trining Uranus and Taurus, where Uranus is, again, innovation and change and liberation and freedom related to value, materials, food. And I look at the sun trining Uranus as like a creative spark of like inspiration of like, oh, now that I have these different ways, like now that I've, Uranus is like almost done with being in Taurus. We have all of these different ways that we see value, that we see security and stability. I think the sun trining Uranus is like that information data that we've received over the years for that is helping us, again, inspire us to do this work. We get to Wednesday, and Wednesday does not have too much going on. The moon will be in Capricorn still. It will conjoin Mars and trine Jupiter. In my opinion, this is all of the go juice for the new moon in Capricorn. While the moon's conjoining Mars, for example, if you've ever opened a business, like one time I was a part of opening a restaurant, like the days before you start something new, like let's say opening a restaurant, there are so many things that you have to get done. It's like, or, for example, if you've ever planned a wedding before, it's like that 2 weeks before the wedding is like, it's everything. Like you got to do all of these things, make sure everything's lined up, even the day before the wedding. That's how I look at the moon conjoining Mars in Capricorn. It's like the moon is dark at this point. We're getting ready for that new moon. The moon is conjoining Mars. We have a ton of work that we have to do to get ready for this new start, to get ready to, again, really just for this new start. And after the moon conjoins Mars, it trines Jupiter. When you can effectively put your energy into something and have, again, an effective system, the work becomes easy. Like, I think a lot about Henry Ford's way of streamlining manufacturing, where it was the manufacturing line, where it was like, hey, everything just goes on this conveyor belt, and these people put these pieces together, these people put these pieces together, and it just streamlined all of the creation of all the Ford cars. It was a very big breakthrough in terms of manufacturing during that time. It took a lot of the, slowness out. And that's how I kind of look at like Jupiter and Taurus is like, that's another example of like slow and steady wins the race. Like in those manufacturing lines, they, it never stops. It's very slow, but it always is progressing. And that's how I want you to look at like Wednesday. It's like, hey, you do this work, but you have the efficiency, you have the plan, you have the system. And as the moon shines Jupiter, it's like your own manufacturing line. Like, I feel like it's not called manufacturing line. I'm struggling thinking of what it's called. But hey, if you do this thing here and there, if you make a plan, stick to the plan. I say that all the time from the stupid Storks movie. That moon shining Jupiter is like, cool, now that everything's in motion, it will continue to be in motion, and I will, again, reap the rewards that I want to see. So a lot of Wednesday is just like, I've got to plan and get all these things together. And if I like, again, and like how Henry Ford did it, like invest the money into creating the system, it is a lot of effort. But once it gets going, like the ability to have an immense amount of output just increases tenfold. So that's how I look at Wednesday. We get to Thursday, and right before the moon will make a trine to Uranus. Then we have that new moon in Capricorn, and then the moon will ingress into Aquarius. That's pretty much what's going on Thursday. That moon trining Uranus is like, again, another part. Like, I think it's interesting that both of the luminaries trine Uranus pretty much around the same time. And I think the moon in Capricorn trining Uranus is like, sometimes when you can, I've talked a lot about the moon in Capricorn is like shutting off the emotions to just get things done. Like when we are super overwhelmed with our personal lives or what's going on, it can be so distracting that we don't do, like that we're not focused on the task at hand. And, I heard this saying from was it Huberman? It was one of those type of people. I can't remember, but it's like the easiest way to change your like mind or to like get out of a mental state is to change your physical state, because the mind follows the body. Like if you are sitting there and you're not doing anything, it's going to be easy for your mind to spiral. But if you are physically exerting yourself something, your mind has no choice but to focus on that thing. And I look at like the moon and like this is how I kind of look at the moon in Capricorn, is allowing yourself to get invested into the work that is in front of you, so your mind and emotions can be not fixated on that. Your subconscious can deal with it. And once you're done with it, you end up feeling a lot better. The moon making that trine to Uranus is kind of like that. You know, the other day I went for my walk. I have to do like a 20-minute walk every single day. And, you know, there's a lot of people that talk about like, oh, I get like a lot of inspiration from my walks. And, you know, I hadn't had that. But the other day, I mean, it was just idea after idea after idea. When I was on this walk, I was like, oh my God, like I think of this, I'm thinking of that. And I started writing it all down, and I felt like super accomplished, and I was just doing something I had to do. But what was nice is that it put my body in like this flow state. It's like the same thing with working out. Like when I was, it's the same thing with working out, but also when I used to ride motocross, when you're riding on a track and it's super repetitive, there would just be times where I'm riding on the track and I'm not even thinking about riding. Like all I'm thinking about is like what's going on in my life. But I had this such clarity around the situation. Like I wasn't like anxious or upset. Like it was just kind of like deep reflection period. And I think a lot of that is, again, like the repetitiveness, it's kind of like finding the quiet in like the middle of the storm. But with the moon in Capricorn making a trine to Uranus, I just think there's that level of being detached emotionally, focusing on the work and allowing that space to kind of like, again, give you creative ideas, give you inspiration, help you see things in a way that you hadn't seen them before. And then we have the new moon in Capricorn, where the new moon in Capricorn is like, what's the plan? We just had Mercury retrograde through here. So we have done some reflection, some review. There's been a change in plans. There's been some delays in the plans that we had. And now the new moon, I mean, Mercury is still technically in shadow. It will enter Capricorn later this week. But the new moon is like, all right, what is the blueprint? What is the plan? What are we going to stick to? And I think that's exciting. So we have that moon, that new moon in Capricorn, and then throughout the day, it's still in Capricorn. And it's not until later in the evening the moon ingresses into Aquarius. I think as the moon goes into Aquarius, there's a little bit more of kind of like, you know, kind of going back to that restaurant analogy that I had, where it's like, if you got to start like the couple days leading up to the grand opening of a restaurant, it's just, there's so much shit going on. It's always a shit show. Working in the service industry is always a shit show. But as the moon goes into Aquarius, it's like, okay, how are, you know, the customers doing? Are we streamlining our process? How are we handling, like, the Aquarius is the social structures. Like Saturn rules Aquarius. Saturn's all about structures, rules, limitations, and Aquarius is the sign of the people. Like Saturn and Capricorn is like government structures, business structures, and Aquarius is like societal structures and how we like integrate in that. And I look at the moon in Aquarius as like, okay, now that we're not thinking in terms of like, you know, black and white ink, we're not thinking in terms of like plans, we're not thinking in terms of like, you know, physical things, we're thinking about people, we're thinking about ideas. That's the big thing with Aquarius, is that the air signs have to do with like things that you don't see. The earth signs have to do more with like tangible goods. Air signs are much more of like ideas, communication, relating to people. But Aquarius is much more of like everybody all in it together. Still kind of a bigger, you know, plan. But like, again, what's the structure and the foundation of how things work in terms of ideas and relating to people? And I think as the moon goes into Aquarius, this is a little bit more of like a, okay, we have this plan, we're implementing the system, but now we're a little bit more open to how it's actually, you know, being received. I look at the moon in Aquarius as like, there are times where your emotions are much more connected to, you know, people's opinions and people's ideas. And a lot of the time, a lot of people's, you know, opinions and ideas and feedback on whatever you're doing is like kind of not constructive, but depending on how you frame it, they can be really constructive. And so I think that moon in Aquarius is like, all right, this is what my plan is. What do other people think about it? And that might be just like you doing that work and someone being like, hey, I think that's a really good idea the way you're doing that. And you're like, fuck yeah, sick. Or, you know, you're doing something and, you know, if you've ever had, well, it's like you could be doing something that you think is right and someone would come along and be like, do you want an easier way to do that? Do you want a better way of doing that? And sometimes you have to like let go of the ego and be like, yeah, let me hear it out. That's how I think the moon in Aquarius shift kind of happens by late Thursday evening. And so then we get to Friday, and the big highlight that we have is Mars making a trine to Jupiter. And throughout the day, the moon will make a square to Jupiter while it's in Aquarius and make a sextile to Venus. Mars trine Jupiter. Does it get any better with Mars exalted, making that trine to Jupiter? This is go big or go home. Mars in Capricorn trining Jupiter, kind of going back to that Henry Ford analogy, is like, I don't know. The history of business is always really interesting to me because of like just what people did. And I can't imagine being like a car manufacturer that wasn't Henry Ford and then seeing Henry Ford like start outputting like 10 times the vehicles that you can do and being like, what the fuck? What is he doing? Mars in Capricorn trining Jupiter is the like, if you have a plan, if you have a system that is efficient and you work that plan in that system, you will see tremendous growth. And with Jupiter and Taurus, this is what I've been trying to say. It's like slow and steady wins the race. And I think Mars trining Jupiter is like, again, how much bang for your buck can you get at every single moment? That's kind of the other thing with Jupiter and Taurus is that like, you know, my mom is a Taurus and she has Jupiter and Taurus. Something I can't get over is she, like when I was growing up, I didn't get any name brand clothes until like my mom got remarried when I was in like middle school. And before that, if it like a nice shopping day was going to like Kmart and getting some sort of new clothes, but that rarely happened. We always ended up going to thrift stores or antique stores. And my mom, or yard sales. That was all we did was yard sales. My mom bought this, and I have it too. I literally took it from my mom because I'm like, this jacket to me is too funny. It's this jacket. It's this 90s brown and black weird antelope pictures of this like, you know, kind of like sweater. It's like, it's almost like a flannel. She bought it for $1 at a yard sale. And there are pictures where I am a baby and she is holding me in that sweater. And there are pictures of me as a grown man with her still wearing that sweater. Like Jupiter and Taurus is like, yo, I'm gonna buy this thing for $1 and I'm gonna make it last. Like, I just feel like Jupiter and Taurus is increasing, again, getting the bang for your buck. It is kind of similar to Jupiter and Capricorn, but Jupiter is in fall in Capricorn, where it's like, it's same thing with Virgo, where it's like Jupiter and Capricorn like wants things to be cheap, versus my mom's not necessarily like cheap. She's just looking for like the best value of things. And she's like, oh, here's $1 for this sweater. And I don't know, I guess she fucking liked it. It definitely fit the 90s vibe. But with just Jupiter and Taurus, it's like increasing the amount of, you know, fruit off of a tree. It's the same thing with like, I know a little bit more about this with like weed growing, but like with weed growing, you put in or nitrogen and fertilizer and other special chemicals. Those little weed flowers will blossom and become even bigger. And that's how I look at Jupiter and Taurus. Sure, it's not going to be overnight, but as you're growing that weed plant, and you take care of it and you tend to it, it might be slow, but the outcome will be even greater than you thought. With Mars in Capricorn making that trine to Jupiter, it's like, if you have those systems in place and you are doing all of that work, and again, maybe that work is like for my mom, like going to yard sales and like hitting up all the yard sales for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But if you have that system, if you have that plan, you are putting that in that effort and not being distracted here, being distracted there, but like, let's make a plan and stick to that plan, you will see the rewards increase like tenfold. Mars trine Jupiter is very much going big or going home. You will see, again, just bigger and better results than I think you're anticipating. Then on Friday, the moon, while it's in Aquarius, makes that square to Jupiter. And here's the thing. With the moon in Aquarius squaring Jupiter, this is kind of a twofold road, or a two-way street. Twofold road. What do I say sometimes? I don't even know what I say sometimes in my videos. Well, the moon's in Aquarius making a square to Jupiter. It's either someone looking at your system and your plan and being like, that doesn't make sense. Like, why are you doing that? That's not efficient. And they just don't see, like, they don't fuck with the vision. Sorry, that just reminded me of something. Me and my sister were joking about shit because she's super funny. And I don't know if you guys ever heard that Little Dicky song. I think it's called Pillow Talk. It's like this 10-minute song and it's so funny. And at the beginning, like, he's like, oh, like, what is he's talking to this girl in the bed and he's like, oh, do you have any siblings? And she's like, I have a brother. And he's like, oh, what does he do? And she's like, he's in the army. And he's like, do you fuck with the war? And I think about that all the time right now with the whole Israel-Palestine thing. I'm like, how many guys and girls are meeting up online and just being like, do you fuck with the war? Anyway, that's been stuck in my head. But the moon squaring Jupiter is someone seeing your plan and seeing your vision and being like, that doesn't make sense. But the other part of it is, again, that outside perspective, that outside help with the moon in Aquarius squaring to Jupiter is maybe there is a more efficient way. And again, maybe you have 90% of that plan or 99% of that plan in that system working the way that you want it. But that 1% little change of like, what if you just did this? Like in music production, the smallest little changes, like when you're doing the mix and the master, I mean, it is just the tiniest little change in something makes everything. And that's how I look at the moon in Aquarius squaring Jupiter is like, you might get an outside ear or an outside perspective that says like, again, like what if you changed this little thing and it like unlocks a whole new part of it. So I do like that. And then after the moon squares Jupiter, it sextiles Venus, where again, Venus is in Sag. There's all this fun, there's all this adventure, just enjoying the journey for what it is. Like Venus in Sag reminds me of like online, like people joke about like car seat princess or something like that. Passenger princess. That's what it is. And like, you're not even aware of where you are. You're just enjoying the drive. Like, I don't care where we're going. Like, I'm just here and it's fun. The moon in Aquarius sextiling Venus in Sag is like, well, again, the moon is going to be in between both of the benefic planets. So there's like some sort of again, with a square, that's like someone's outside opinion, not necessarily agreeing with like where your vision is at, but that could be helpful because then the moon then makes the sextile to Venus and Sag where it's like, oh, that actually does sound better. That actually does make more sense. And why didn't I think of that? Like, a good example is, there's a really famous example of this. Some guy was talking to Elon Musk. This is a really popular video and I thought it was really interesting. Even I'm not a fan of Elon Musk, but I really like how the situation just went down. And Elon Musk is talking about like, yeah, this rocket is, this is how it all works. And the guy's kind of like, well, what something, the afterburners, like, how do you do that? Like, wouldn't that be like this stage here? And Elon Musk kind of goes, that's a fucking good idea. Why didn't I think of that? We're going to change that right now. And it's just like, oh, well, would you look at that? That's how I look at the moon squaring Jupiter and then sextiling Venus and Sag is like, again, that's a great idea that can unlock all these new opportunities. Let's just go with it. Let's, no questions asked. And then we get to Saturday. And on Saturday is when we're going to be having the moon, while it's in Aquarius, make that square to Uranus. It will then ingress into Pisces and then sextile Mercury. While on Saturday, the highlight we have is Mercury going into Capricorn yet again. So the moon making that square to Uranus, I would imagine like if you're like Elon Musk and you have a whole team of employees building a fucking rocket ship and you go to them and say, hey, we got to make this huge change. Like the moon in Aquarius squaring Uranus and Taurus is like major disruption. There's some sort of a disruption here. There's some sort of again, the ground not being stable that can be upsetting at first on a Saturday. But then as the moon ingresses into Pisces, where there's kind of this more, our emotions are changeable, they're adaptable. Yes, it will conjoin Saturn on Sunday, but we're not there yet. And again, the moon ingresses into Pisces way later in the evening. It does make a sextile to Mercury in Capricorn. And Mercury ingresses into Capricorn. So now that we're done with this whole Mercury and Sag thing, like for me, when Mercury was retrograde in Capricorn, I was like, I have like a lot of plans for the new year. And I've more or less, I've had the same schedule for the past 4 years. And so I'm really working on changing it. And then as Mercury went into Sag and Station Direct, I just realized I'm like, what? The schedule idea I had is dumb. Like, I got to do something different. And while Mercury's been in Sag, I've just been trying to be more like open-minded to how things are and not being like, it's got to be like, putting all these tiny pieces together, but more of like, what's the bigger idea? What's the bigger plan? And I think as Mercury goes into Capricorn, for me personally, it's just like, all right, here's probably what's going to be the most efficient, effective thing. We're kind of revisiting what was going on that Mercury Cazimi that we had a couple weeks ago. But as the moon in Pisces sextiles Mercury, this is, again, being open-minded, being adaptable emotionally to seeing like a different way of doing things. Mercury is about, again, commerce, communication, logistics, planning. It is in Capricorn where it's like, again, systems, regulations. Mercury in Capricorn is like, cool. Our minds are not in Sagittarius land where we're too much in the bigger picture. We can get grounded in reality with like what's going to work and what's not going to work. I think that's the biggest part about Mercury in Capricorn is just not being so lost in the clouds with Mercury and Sag and retrograde in there. We're much more in reality with our minds at this point. And the moon in Pisces is kind of like adapting to that reality. And then we get to Sunday. And on Sunday is when we're going to be having the moon conjoin Saturn. And then it will sextile Jupiter and then sextile Mars. So Sunday, like the moon in Pisces conjoining Saturn is like, the way I want to say it right now, based off like what is coming down for me, what I'm essentially channeling, and this may or may not be like the best thing, but like the other day I was doing a workout and I got to this point of workout, I was like, I don't want to finish doing it. And it's like in that moment, I was like, no, I have to shut that up. I have to do it. Because if I do it that way, if I say, no, I don't want to finish this, well, how I do one thing is how I do everything. And I had to like internalize that and keep going anyway. And that's how I look at the moon in Pisces conjoining Saturn, is like, there might be a wall spiritually and emotionally inside that you hit, but that is up to you of whether or not you take that as a complete defeat or if you take that as like an obstacle. Like there's a difference between a wall, like a boundary, and an obstacle and a challenge. I mean, like this is true for sales too. Like if you ever watch any sales coaching, I mean, people were like, no, I'm not interested in that. And, you know, some people are like, oh, okay, no worries, bye-bye. Or like really good salespeople will be like, well, you know, what's stopping you from doing it? Is it like the price thing? You know, would you do it differently if the price was different? Would you do it differently if, you know, you had permission from your wife or whatever it is? The moon conjoining Saturn is going to feel like an emotional wall. I would argue it is a obstacle to overcome. And again, this is like spiritually and emotionally on the inside. Like for me, there's been so many times where I subconsciously like stop myself because I have shitty subconscious beliefs, like we all do, that can stop me from doing what I need to do because it's like, oh, I can't, or, oh, I've had too much, or, you know, it's not possible for me. And one of the big things with like my workouts lately has been like shutting that voice up and making those changes, like being aware that I'm saying that and then instantly doing that anyway. After the moon conjoins Saturn, it's going to sextile Jupiter and it's going to sextile Mars. There's like an instant reward for meeting that challenge and going past it. Like again, Saturn and Pisces, it's like, okay, well, like, you know, I'm super harsh with you guys and some of you really enjoy it, which I fucking appreciate you guys. And some people have like really negative reactions to it, but it's like Saturn and Pisces is so much of like, you know, you just got to grow up. And that's like a part of life. And, you know, I'm on this journey with you guys. Like everything that I'm saying is like stuff that I'm going through as well. I'm not fucking perfect. I'm only 27, which again, the older I get, the more I realize how fucking young I am versus like when I was 20, I was like, I'm old and I've seen to know it all. I'm so retarded. But after you kind of hit that emotional discipline, that emotional boundary, and you like fortify yourself and like, okay, again, it's not easy. You have to do something challenging. And it's not that the actual thing you're doing is challenging. It's the limitations that you tell yourself like interpersonally. Once you hit that and you understand that it's a challenge and it's an obstacle that you can get over, there's an instant reward as it sextiles Jupiter and it sextiles Mars. I feel like the moon in Pisces sextiling Jupiter and Taurus it's easier than you expected. And then as the moon sextiles Mars, you have the energy to do it a lot better than you thought you did. Like, I know you guys have had this experience before where you thought you couldn't do something and you ended up doing it anyway. And you realized, one, you actually really liked doing that thing. And two, it was a lot more fun and easier to do than you ever thought. And now you want to do it again. That's kind of the vibe for Sunday. And that's how I want to leave off this week. Next week, we have a ton of other transits. We have the sun sextiling Neptune. We have Mercury trining Jupiter, which I love. Venus squaring Neptune, which like I also love. I don't mind Venus and Sag squaring Neptune. Delusional is okay at points. The sun will conjoin Pluto. The sun enters Aquarius and Pluto enters Aquarius. There is a vibe shift next week. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss next week's horoscope. Make sure you like this video. It actually does a lot for the algorithm for me. So if you want to support the channel, like it, comment below. What are you excited for this week? What are you guys going through and how are you going to manage it and handle it as we go throughout this week? And with that being said, I'll be seeing you guys next time.